The waters of New York and New Jersey are some of the busiest in the world. Fishing boats, cargo vessels, and tugboats with their barges cross paths, while just underneath the surface, life hums. Humpbacks, tiger sharks, and green sea turtles are just some of the species that use New York's coastal waters to feed and to migrate. And things are about to get even busier at sea as New York City plans for the development of offshore wind. This powerful technology has the potential to power millions of homes while reducing our reliance on polluting fossil fuels. Offshore wind will play a major role in the transition to renewable energy and the fight against the climate crisis, so it's vital to understand its impacts both on wildlife and on human communities.
Right from the nearshore environment all the way to the deep waters, we have a very dynamic and productive system that I don't think people fully understand when they're standing on the beach in the Rockaways or Coney Island. Something that's coming close to our shores in the future is offshore wind development, renewable energy, something that our society and planet needs to combat the climate crisis.
We're looking at rapidly growing offshore wind energy deployment now in the United States to help achieve aggressive goals for offshore wind deployment. Many years of planning goes into building offshore wind farms. One of the goals of the government is to build these offshore wind farms in an environmentally, economically, and socially responsible manner.
As renewable energy and offshore wind development begins to develop off the waters that are already busy here in the New York Bight, we want to make sure that it occurs in such a way that there is minimal harm to no harm to these animals.
Traditional energy sources contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, which impact both the environment and human health. On the renewable energy side, we're talking about wind energy, both onshore and offshore, solar energy, and some geothermal, hydropower, and possibly marine energy contributions. The U.S. Atlantic coast is really at the forefront of offshore wind energy deployment. There have been numerous lease sales up and down the U.S. Atlantic coast, all the way from Maine down to the Carolinas, powering thousands and tens of thousands of households. When you put a wind farm or a solar energy farm onshore, of course, you have specific considerations with folks who live in the area and those communities. Offshore, it's a different set of considerations, but quite often they're considered to be fewer siting constraints. Offshore wind speeds are higher over the oceans versus onshore because there's less friction. You've got this nice sheet of open ocean and the winds can build up over that versus onshore winds are minimized by forests and mountains and topography. We also have the ability to build very large wind turbines in the offshore. And the higher you get above the surface of the ocean, the higher the wind speeds. In the offshore, we can produce some very efficient machines for producing energy. So of course, there are the many positive considerations for the environment and communities and decarbonization goals. There are also some potentially negative impacts that we would like to either avoid, minimize, or compensate for as we put new structures into our oceans. And when I talk about structures, I'm talking about the entire turbine from the blades to the nacelle, the tower, foundations, and the transmission cables to shore to get this energy from the offshore turbines into the onshore grid itself. So considerations for offshore noise in the environment, considerations for birds and bats, looking at how fish might interact with these structures in the oceans.
So we work on the waters very close to New York City. There are several different types of prey species that large predatory fish, sharks, whales, dolphins feed on. One of the ones that's an important driver that influences the presence of whales, dolphins, other large predatory fish are Atlantic menhaden, locally known as bunker. Those are a small schooling forage fish that these top predators will feed on. Another one, which is a favorite meal, is something called sand lance or sand eels. Very small schooling fish that bring the whales and dolphins and seabirds all out in these massive mixed feeding aggregations. And those occur dozens of miles off our shores. The whales that are here are mainly the baleen whales, in essence, the filter feeding whales. Animals like the charismatic, acrobatic, humpback whale behind me, the fin whales, which are the second largest animal to ever live on this planet, the North Atlantic right whale, critically endangered animal. Our focus currently is to better understand the needs and patterns of habitat use by whales and dolphins in these waters to better protect these animals while they are here in the New York Bight, as well as to set a model in protecting them throughout key portions of their range. While we're seeing this amazing resurgence of the use of these waters by large whales, coastal dolphins, and other marine life, there are a host of human impacts that occur in these waters. There are, marine industries such as shipping and fishing that can have potential impacts, whether that is levels of ocean noise that can affect these animals directly, vessel strikes to large whales getting hit by a ship, which can cause serious injury leading to death, and or whether there are impacts from entanglement in fishing gear. For offshore wind development, there are concerns about the potential impacts that both the development and activities around offshore wind can have to whales, dolphins, and their important habitat. We use what's called passive acoustic monitoring, where we use different types of technological buoys to, in essence, listen for the calls of whales, to better understand the presence and habitat use, or areas where we find whales, by positioning these buoys in certain areas in the New York Bight. And we can learn about when these animals are here, when they're calling. Are they calling, various months more than others, days of night more than others? Is this consistent over time? And so you can really build up a big picture of how whales and dolphins in the New York Bight use these waters, when they're here, when they're using these waters. And we use that to then help make informed, evidence-based recommendations to various marine resource groups like industry, government, offshore wind developers, state agencies, federal agencies, to promote the best practices in order to protect whales, dolphins, and their important habitats.
It's really important that we work with a wide variety of communities, that the government works with a wide variety of communities in properly siting offshore wind farms, from local communities, including the fishing communities, to state governments. There are a wide variety of considerations for communities where these offshore wind farms are built. On, the positive side, the benefit side, the building of these offshore wind farms can provide local jobs.
So the Impact Program is a community program where we're trying to not just get youth, but also teachers involved in the conservation work that we're doing. We're doing listening sessions with community groups and organizations to see how it could be more inclusive, right? So that's career panels, that's online tools and curriculums for teachers, and connecting all of that to a burgeoning offshore wind industry that's about to create tons of jobs here in New York City. And so what we're looking to do is get them through the door now, as early as possible, not for the jobs that's going to be created in the next year or two, but we're talking about 5 or 10 years. We're trying to identify what are those jobs, what the training looks like for those jobs, and getting them through the door to advance and be ready for those jobs.